Hey guys, today I want to give you my first impressions of Ashes of Creation, which is a brand new sandbox MMO that was recently released on Steam Early Access. And let's just say the sentiment is not great among the players. It has mixed reviews on Steam, but that being said, when it comes to mixed reviews, it really can go either way, I think, depending on the type of game you personally are expecting. So this video in particular is going to cover my first 25 hours in the game as a new player, which is about how long it took me to reach level 10. And I want to specify that I did not follow the development of this project beforehand and also never bought any alpha keys or Kickstarter tiers, so I truly am a new player going into this experience pretty much blind. Alright, so starting off we have the character creation, and in this game there are 8 different races to choose from, and I mean they look fine I guess, but to be honest it feels a little generic, very Dungeons and Dragons to me, if that makes sense. You have, the elves, dwarves, humans, orcs, trolls, all the kind of standard fantasy races you would expect from a game like this, just with different names. I personally went with the Puri, I think I'm saying that correctly, I don't know, just because it felt like the most unique to me. I also felt like the character creation was a little bit lackluster in terms of the customization. I know it's an alpha, so there's probably more coming, but there was only like 6 presets. They all looked pretty similar, and you could change the body size, the skin color, but there was only like 3 different options and only 4 hairstyles. So I found in my experience, a lot of people in the game look very similar. Some of them look like nearly identical. But to be fair, there are sections for more detailed customization. Like I know you can change the ears and mouth. I didn't really feel like it made too much of a difference, so I just kind of skipped it. And also, oddly, there's like a whole section for nail color, which I guess is interesting, but it's kind of like random for an MMO. Like, when am I ever going to see this guy's nails in game? I'm not really sure. But anyway, moving on, we have also the classes, and right away you can choose from 8 different archetypes. And again, they all feel a little generic, very Dungeons and Dragons-esque. You have the Bard, the Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, Summoner, and Tank. And yes, those are the actual names. Like they actually chose Tank as the name instead of giving it something a little bit more creative. Again, it's fine, whatever. I guess it's good for clarity, but I would have liked to see a little bit more world building in the names of the classes. And you'll notice it's pretty consistent theme throughout this review that things are a little generic in this world. So for my character, I decided to go with the mage because I tend to enjoy ranged combat in other MMOs. And I mean, let's be honest, it's pretty hard, I feel like, to screw up a mage in a fantasy game. So I wanted to see their take on it. I also did the Ayla starting region. I heard that was like the most fleshed out. So I can't speak on the other classes in terms of combat because I haven't played them. But so far, the combat with mage has genuinely been really fun, in my opinion. I feel like at times it does feel like a little bit of a direct ripoff of the mage from World of Warcraft, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, like, altogether, because it is a fun playstyle. But I mean, some of the abilities, as you'll see on the screen, are quite literally identical with even the same name and actually very similar artwork as well. Like we have Cone of Cold, which does basically the exact same thing as the mage in World of Warcraft. Blizzard, which also does the exact same thing, and also Frostbolt. So, I mean, I would have maybe liked to see them be a little bit more creative instead of just like directly copying the mage from these other games. But I understand that like it's good gameplay, so use what works. But it even has like the same exact Frostfire and Arcane trio as well. So yeah, a little suspicious, but again, whatever. It's good gameplay. Speaking of the gameplay, though, if we're talking about the combat in more detail, it's really tough in this game. If you pull more than a few enemies that are like your level or higher, in my experience, you're like pretty much dead unless you have some sort of stun ability. And I personally love that aspect of this game. I feel like it's so good to finally have an MMO that makes the world feel genuinely dangerous and actually makes you like have to critically think about how you use your abilities and in what order and their sort of combos. It's, in my opinion, the closest thing you can compare it to is like classic WoW, but with a little bit more modern action elements like modern WoW and Black Desert Online, but leaning more towards like a WoW system of combat, just with a few elements of BDO. So like you can block and dodge, and you can also manually attack with your weapon. So there are those action elements to it if you want to engage with them, but you don't have to necessarily use them. But the main like bulk of the combat is, classic caster abilities with a casting bar, clicking the icons on your action bar, stuff like that. Also, after big pulls, you definitely have to sit and like eat some food to heal up. Very reminiscent of like classic WoW, that kind of slower combat and regeneration after combat. You'll also, in my experience, find yourself using like healing potions a lot. Although mana was never an issue for me, I never even thought about mana. So I don't know, maybe it's different for other classes, but at least for early game mage, it did not matter for me. And keep in mind also, my experience so far is only up to level 10. So I'm sure the class is probably even going to get even more complicated and more interesting over time, which I'm super excited about. It's something that actually is genuinely driving me to continue playing the game because I want to see how the class like fleshes out. And I like that the abilities that you select are in like a tree, so you can sort of decide how your class grows over time and make changes depending on the area you're in or what you're fighting. One thing I did not expect coming into this game is how central gathering and crafting are to the core gameplay loop, and honestly, I really enjoy the way that they implemented it in this game. Something about the way that they handle resources is just so addicting to me, and it kept me coming back over and over again to continue like chopping down trees, mining ore, and harvesting herbs out in the world. And I think that, in my opinion, fishing and hunting so far have been the least interesting gathering professions. Fishing is basically just an AFK. You just kind of sit there with no interactive components. You just fish at any source of water, but it can be like a nice break if you want that. So that's definitely the least interactive. And then hunting also seems to be either not like really implemented properly or an afterthought. It's basically just like these random static animal models that you find out in the world, and they have a little crosshair above them. And basically, instead of attacking that animal, you just go up to them. And for whatever reason, the animation is you just literally petting them until they die. So, and then you get like their carcass basically. So yeah, those were like the least interesting I felt like, but I'm sure maybe they're gonna flesh them out later. But anyway, once you get these materials, you can head to a city where then you can process them into different materials and ultimately craft them into things like armor and weapons, jewelry, potions, basically anything you can think of in the game, you can probably craft it. And as you gain experience, you can harvest higher tiers of these resources. So there's a bunch of different types of tiers you can get, and everyone obviously is trying to get the highest tier resource. So it's a bit exciting when you're mining a piece of ore or chopping down a tree and you get like a heroic or a legendary material. That's kind of an exciting part of the game that I've enjoyed, especially because the materials are quite hard to come by, like the high end ones. So as you gain experience, you can harvest them a little bit easier, get them more often, which in turn allows you to make higher tiered items. And you can, of course, equip them yourself for PvP, or you can just sell them for gold. Now, when you head into these cities to process materials and craft them into items, you're going to notice by the marketplace that there's a ton of different benches for every profession. It's actually a little overwhelming at first just how many different benches there are. But personally, over time, I've learned to love the fact that you can experience every profession and that you aren't just locked into like two of them, for example, with other MMOs like WoW. In fact, I actually learned later on that you can actually level your character and gain experience by just processing and crafting materials, which is amazing in my opinion. It really is, it gives that sandbox experience where you can level up not just by doing combat or quests, but really just by being a crafter or a merchant, which again, I love that. I think it's amazing. But that being said, the game's auction house, which doesn't work the way you'd think, but we can get into that later. The game's auction house doesn't really become available until level 10, so I think it's something you're meant to focus on maybe a little bit later in your leveling experience, but it's good because it gives a new player the ability to sort of learn their class a little bit first, do some basic quests, and then slowly grow into the crafting experience over time. Now, if you are expecting a traditional story-driven questline experience for leveling, then I think you're going to be very disappointed in what this game has to offer, especially if you're used to something like World of Warcraft. I personally could not really find any story quests past level 3, basically as soon as I left the tutorial zone. And I found that pretty much all of the quests you can do come from what's called commission boards. So you'll find in cities that there are various posts set up throughout the city that give you options to do fetch quests for, very basic things like kill 10 wolves over here, or, go explore this area, or chop down 20 ash trees. It's very basic. It doesn't really feel revolutionary. There's nothing groundbreaking about the questing system really at all in this game, and there also is very little variety in the quests. You'll get the same like chop 20 ash tree quests over and over and over again in the span of 1 hour, and it can get very, very repetitive, especially with how slow leveling is and just how grindy everything is. You might find yourself kind of getting bored and tedious and feeling like things are tedious over time. What I later learned, and I think the game doesn't really do a good job of explaining this to you, you kind of just figure it out over time, is that this game is focused on city development and not story quests. So what I mean by that is the world is split up into different towns, also known as nodes, and you'll see these areas marked out on the map in different colors. And basically, each of these nodes starts out very basic, and as players invest their time and their resources into improving that node, then it evolves over time. And like it actually physically evolves in the sense that you'll see the city grow and become much larger, but also you'll unlock new quests, and supposedly dynamic events are supposed to happen. More opportunities to build buildings so you can access, craft new resources, things like that, right? So I think a lot of people will go into this game expecting a story-driven experience because that's how it kind of positions itself from the beginning. But it's really more of just a tutorial zone, and then it throws you out into a sandbox experience later. Also, the game really starts to open up once you become level 10. Before that, you're very much just grinding to level 10. And then once you become level 10, then you can actually become a citizen of one of these towns and actually contribute in a meaningful way to its growth. And by that, I mean you can vote for a mayor who will like make real policy decisions for the node. They can set taxes and construct new buildings. You can participate in wars with other cities to, I don't know exactly what that does, but I'm assuming probably just to steal resources, something of that nature. But they're essentially large scale battles. I have not had the experience yet to do that, but I'm sure it's very fun. I also was super disappointed to discover that pretty much every single node that I went into has literally the exact same design. And yes, the landscape is a little bit different, around them, but the actual city itself is like pretty much, it's impossible to tell them apart. They are using the exact same building models. The marketplace is like literally exactly identical. Everything is almost in the identical same place. The walls look the same. There really is like no unique design or architecture to any of the nodes. Maybe if you go more up north towards where like the dwarf area is, maybe it's a little different. I haven't really had the opportunity to go up there, but I just feel like I would have liked to see some unique architecture. Like in World of Warcraft, all the cities are so different. They have such unique architecture and people, and like it really feels like it's like a whole different culture, but it just does not feel this way here. It feels very generic, very just like, standard medieval castle in every single city. And one thing I think would actually make this really cool is if citizens of each city had the ability to maybe vote on skins for the city. Maybe Intrepid could come up with like different, like a base skin, and then you could, work to unlock a unique skin that looks cool, something like that. And the citizens can work towards that. But yeah, for now, I just feel like it's very generic, very boring. Hopefully you'll see in this video, I've filmed a few minutes of me going through different towns, but they really look pretty much identical. And while we're on the topic of cities and why they suck, let me also say that it is really annoying to find pretty much anything in these cities. I literally could not find anything even if my life depended on it. Like some of the crafting stations are just like randomly hidden in an obscure building that you would just like never ever think to look in. And there's literally like no indication that it would even be in that building. Even when you're like looking on the mini map and trying to cross-reference, I have literally spent like 30 minutes trying to find an economy grade crafting station in one city, only to figure out it's like hidden in the like second floor of a building. And I just have to ask myself, like, why? Like what really is the point of that? If the cities are all going to look the same, you might as well just like put all the crafting stations in the exact same spot as well, just to make it easy. But anyway, I feel like there needs to be an NPC that helps guide you to different services. Like in World of Warcraft, you can go to the guard, You can ask him, "Hey, where do I find like the tailoring trainer?" Right? And he'll mark it on your mini map. You can walk over there. But we just don't have that in Ashes of Creation, which makes it just so extremely frustrating sometimes when you're just circling over and over again in the city trying to look for like a crate station and you just like cannot find it. You ask in chat and nobody responds back to you. So yeah, that's something I think would really help with that frustration, just having an NPC to talk to. Speaking of crates also, since I mentioned the crate stations, crates are a huge part of the gameplay that I later discovered that is very fun, but also, again, very frustrating. So the gameplay for crates essentially revolves around this idea of going out, collecting some resources, coming back to a town, packing them up into a crate, and then you haul it a long distance to another node for gold. And so essentially the farther the distances that you travel, you're supposed to be able to make more gold. And it's sort of like a risk versus reward type gameplay where you have to decide, do I take a longer route and risk, maybe more opportunities for other players to attack me and steal my crates? Or do I do a shorter route and, get some more guaranteed income, but it's maybe much lower, right? And you have to actually transport the crate to another node. You can't sell it in your own node. So like the actual core gameplay is quite literally traveling these long distances. It can take actually several hours to move between these two towns sometimes, which I actually felt was quite cool. I honestly really enjoy it. It sort of feels like a fantasy version of Trucking Simulator. I don't know if that's going to make any sense to any of you, but yeah, it sounds quite weird, but the world is very vast and it does at times feel like you are like genuinely a merchant embarking on this journey to like sell your goods. And it does feel genuinely dangerous. You'll find like enemies on the road and you have to like avoid them. You sometimes will like freak out if you see a player walking by and you're like, oh no, they're gonna attack me, but then they don't. So it is quite an exciting experience in my opinion. That being said, I think the game needs to do a much better job of explaining all of this to the player. There really is just like no direction, no guidance whatsoever, to the point where I had some extremely frustrating experiences. So for example, I'm in Miraleth, I want to try out the crate system for the first time. So I make a crate, and mind you, it takes a bit of time to make these crates. You have to farm multiple different resources and a currency called scrip in order to make them, as well as another currency called glint, right? So you're basically like collecting a lot of different stuff. You finally make the crate, and I check the crate. There's an actual UI menu that tells you how much money you'll make at different cities based on the distance, right? Except you don't realize as a new player that this UI is just like completely lying to you for some reason. The amounts that are listed on this UI just like are not true whatsoever, and the values are way lower than what it tells you. So I click on this UI and I'm like, great, I can make like a full gold piece, which is a lot of money in this game early on, by moving from Miraleth to Tangled Post. Very long, travel distance, but I'm like, you know what? I got some time. Let's do it, right? So I make my way to Tangled Post, and it takes me like almost an hour in total to set up the crate and walk all the way over there, only to find out that you cannot sell crates in a town that is not, I guess, rank 3 or doesn't have like a marketplace set up. So I'm sitting here in Tangled Post trying to figure out where do I turn in this crate, only to get responses from people in the chat being like, yeah, sorry, you actually cannot sell the crate. You actually wasted your time walking all the way over there. So I'm like, okay, that's frustrating, but whatever. I click on the crate menu again, see where the next closest town is, and I see that New Ayla, this town up north, is pretty close. It's gonna take another like 25 minutes to walk up there, and it says I'll make like 80 silver. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting most of the amount that I thought I was gonna get, whatever, right? I walk all the way up to New Ayla, takes me another, 25, 30 minutes, whatever. I finally get there, go to turn in the crate, and it says that the crate is worth 20 silver. And I ask in chat, how come the UI tells you that you can earn 80 silver, but when you go to turn it in, it's 20 silver? And literally nobody knows. Some people are like, it's dynamic pricing. Some people are like, it's just bugged. And I'm sitting here like, why doesn't the UI represent accurately the amount that you're going to make from transporting these crates? So yeah, that was genuinely like one of the most frustrating days that I played this game. But I guess you do learn your lesson the hard way. That's sort of like something I've consistently experienced with this game, is just learning hard lessons that honestly really piss you off, but then you never do that thing again. Now that we've talked about gameplay in Ashes of Creation, which I've genuinely enjoyed, I want to talk about the bugs because there are a lot of them, and some of them are so bad that they literally make the game unplayable at times. I would say the game is ultimately like incredibly jank. It does not feel like this has been in development for 10 years. It feels like it's been in development for at most maybe 1 to 2 years, which is actually crazy to say that out loud, but that's genuinely how it feels. You will constantly fall through the world for absolutely no reason. Like you will literally clip through the ground. And then after that, die, lose half of your materials, accrue XP debt because you died, and then relog to try and fix the issue, only to die again and lose more XP and more materials. And this can become a cycle where you literally will grind materials for hours and then lose literally all of them and most of your XP because the game is broken. That is just obviously not fun, of course. It makes a lot of people just want to like rage quit the game. Of course, I've stuck through it because I do see potential in the game long term, but that's not the only thing. We also have some crazy lag spikes that come out of nowhere, especially when you're in a city with a lot of people in it. Sometimes, as you'll see on the screen, the lag will be so bad that you literally cannot even move materials between your bags, which like that's crazy for a game that is based around collecting materials. There's also a crazy bug that they have not fixed for weeks now, where you will go up to the storage clerk in a city where you can open up sort of like your long-term storage, your warehouse storage rather, for that city. And no matter how many times you spam the button to open it, it just like will not open the menu. I have sometimes sat there for like 5 minutes straight, just clicking over and over again to open up this menu, and it will not open. And then randomly, by like the grace of God, it will open up, and for just no reason. And I'm not really sure why this is. Someone recently in chat told me that there's the part of the issue is that only a certain number of people can have their storage menu open at the same time. This just feels like a crazy like thing that should be fixed like immediately. And the fact that there's like been like dead silence on it for 3 weeks since the game launched is kind of crazy to me. I also briefly want to talk about the graphics because, in my opinion, there just isn't really anything special about what they are offering here. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like this game just does not look like a game that came out in 2025. To me, it looks like a 2016, 2017 game at best. And even the moments where, the environment does look pretty, I think it just sort of looks like a generic Unreal Engine game. I sort of found myself missing the art style of things like World of Warcraft, where there's just so much character in the world and the design of the world. Everything in this world in Ashes of Creation just feels so mundane, so boring, lacking in detail or character that I never really felt compelled to explore anything ever. Which is kind of crazy for an MMO if you think about it, where the whole point of the game is quite literally to go out and explore with your friends. And keep in mind that all this footage that I've recorded is with the graphics set to their maximum settings. That means this is the best the game can possibly look. So if you have like an even worse PC than me, which I'm lucky to have kind of a beast of a PC, but a lot of people don't have that, and so the game is going to look significantly worse for a lot of people. So I think that's important to keep in mind if graphics are something that matter to you in these kind of games. So given all of this, the big question is, would I recommend Ashes of Creation to you as a new player? And I think if you enjoy crafting and economy elements more than anything, then I think you'll really enjoy this sort of like niche grindy experience. But otherwise, I think if you're looking for, something story-based, or for like a theme park MMO, something like a WoW killer, I think you'd probably just be better off waiting to see how things develop over time in early access, especially at $50, which is like more expensive even than like I think a WoW expansion. You're basically paying a AAA price for a very broken, very unfinished experience that ultimately boils down to grinding mobs for hundreds of hours, walking very long distances on very boring cobblestone roads in very uninspired, terrain, crafting items, here and there, and maybe some occasional PvP at max level. You're not really going to get anything else out of this experience. But if you do love that kind of grindy game experience, then this might be perfect for you, especially if you're the kind of person who just wants to go out and, chop down 100 trees while you watch a YouTube video on the side, then this can be a very relaxing experience in that regard. So, I think it's a niche game that has a very niche audience, but do expect if you do decide to purchase it to get very frustrated a lot. Expect to have your time wasted over and over again by systems that do not accurately explain how they work, or just straight up give you completely false information. And also, I would expect to ask in chat for help a lot with all sorts of things. You may even need to watch YouTube videos just to figure out how some basic stuff in the game works. At least that's what I had to do. So overall, I'd probably rate this game, I think, a 5 out of 10, maybe 5.5 out of 10. It has, I think, the bones of something really great, but it definitely needs a lot of work and a lot of polish, especially if it's going to be something worth $50. So yeah, hopefully the development team can pull it together and really make it something special, because I know that there's potential there. That's what keeps me coming back. It really is a unique experience. It just really has a long way to go. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this review. I hope it gave you at least a little bit of insight into what this experience is like for people who are new to this game and this genre of game. Yeah, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content of Ashes of Creation, and I'll be sure to make another review video later on once I'm max level, and maybe, my experience will be different once I have access to large-scale PvP and all those sorts of things. Dungeons, raids, whatever else they add to the game. So be sure to follow along and see what else comes to the channel.